We're sitting on a time bomb here.
When I was a medical student, the pro-choice medical group, they were coached to never ever talk about the fetus.
We kill 90% of Down syndrome babies.
With the abortion pill, we know that there are many issues. This is not Tylenol, as they tried to push it off as.
Welcome to this evening's Life on Film screening of Doctors Standing Firm and International Pro-life Roundtable. My name is Josie Luetke, and I'm the Director of Education and Advocacy for Campaign Life Coalition, and I'm also one of the members of the National March for Life Organizing Committee. First of all, let me extend our deepest gratitude and thanks to all of you who are able to participate in the National March for Life or one of the provincial marches. We are so thankful that so many of you were able to show your support for life. In Ottawa, we had almost 6,000 people in attendance. It was a great show of solidarity. There was gorgeous weather, and I think you all demonstrated what it means to truly stand firm. So following the National March for Life, we had our annual Rose Dinner, and I had the privilege of moderating a discussion about half an hour long with 4 medical professionals from 3 different countries. We had Dr. Kiely Williams from Canada, Dr. Monique Ruberu and Dr. Haywood Robinson from the United States, and Dr. Calum Miller from the United Kingdom. They answered some pre-written questions and some audience member questions. They covered topics as diverse as the abortion pill and conscience rights and the United Nations. So I think it was a really interesting discussion, and you now have the special privilege of being able to listen to it this evening. And so without further ado, I'd like to present Doctors Standing Firm and International Pro-life Roundtable.
We're sitting on a time bomb here.
When I was a medical student, the pro-choice medical group, they were coached to never ever talk about the fetus.
We kill 90% of Down syndrome babies.
With the abortion pill, we know that there are many issues. This is not Tylenol, as they tried to push it off as.
We should not have a choice to go outside of the basic precepts that have stood for millennia in this ministry of medicine.
It's never in the benefit of a patient to have a physician caring for them who will do what they believe is wrong.
The other side is about choice, my body, my choice, my own choice. Well, yes, we know that we are the most pro-choice people on the planet. All you need to do is read the Bible. God just tells us he wants to make the right choices, right?
When you see the work done by pro-life groups at the UN and the way that they can mobilize nations, there's actually a huge amount that can be done.
God is in charge of everything. He will make a way.
There's a cloud on the horizon there, and the storm is coming. It's coming, y'all, and we are going to win.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to serve as the moderator for this panel discussion at the 2023 National March for Life Rose Dinner. We have a very unique and valuable opportunity tonight to hear from 4 medical professionals from 3 different countries. We'll learn that on the one hand, many of the life issues and the problems that we're facing around them in Canada are actually affecting other countries around the world. But on the other hand, Canada is particularly terrible in comparison. Our keynote speaker, Dr. Miller, he graduated from the University of Oxford School of Medicine in 2015. He is a medical doctor and researcher in the UK. We have Dr. Haywood Robinson. He's from Texas. He's the Director of Medical Affairs and Education for 40 Days for Life. He and his late wife, Noreen, were abortionists, but they became pro-life upon an encounter with Christ in 1986, and they retired from medicine in 2019. We also have our very own Dr. Kiely Williams from Canada. She sits on the board of Canadian Physicians for Life. She practices family medicine in Calgary and is a clinical associate at the University of Calgary School of Medicine. She trains medical students and resident physicians. She's also lobbied on a number of issues like euthanasia, sex-selective abortion, and conscience rights, including at a UN parallel event that was organized by Campaign Life Coalition. So thank you very much for being here, Dr. Kiely Williams. And last but not least, we have Dr. Monique Ruberu, who is from Pennsylvania, and she was actually born here in Canada and spent some of her youth here, but she then left us to go to the United States. She is a board-certified OBGYN trained in NAPRO, or Natural Procreative Technology, and she is vice chair on the 40 Days for Life board. So please put your hands together for all of our wonderful panelists. Can you describe the state of the medical profession in your country and how it has evolved since you first started medical school? What's the typical mindset of your colleagues? Is there any gatekeeping, and how does that affect patients? Maybe Dr. Ruberu, we could start with you.
Sure. I was educated in the United States, did my medical school there, and from the time that I have been in medical school, I have seen a drastic shift. I have a lot of medical students and university students who come up to me and they ask me, how on earth can I become a pro-life OBGYN if I have to walk through this sort of training? So it is very concerning, it is very scary. However, at the same time, I always say to them that we always have to remember who is actually in charge. God is in charge of everything. And through every situation, He will make a way. And so if you stand up and if you promote good, as an OBGYN, I have been persecuted over and over again, but He has always managed to open a door for me, and He always makes a way.
Thank you. Dr. Williams?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think one thing I'd like to say is maybe a little bit hopeful. I think in general, our physician colleagues actually want to do good. They want to heal. They want to do what is right. The thing that I've noticed changing is the foundation of what that means. So the work that we're doing to win hearts and minds, when we bring that foundation back to truth, everyone is going to follow. Well, not everyone, but many people will follow. It's actually a fairly small cohort of people that are very, very, very much against us. There's actually quite a lot of people that want to do good. They're just not sure what that means anymore.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate reality. But yes, Dr. Robinson.
One of the things I've noticed, I spent about 20 years on our medical school admissions committee, and no applicant has ever put on their personal statement that they want to be the greatest abortionist in town. It just hasn't happened. So all I have to say is that right now what we're seeing is something called fear brought from the other side. We have people, medical students now, who are fearful of going into OBGYN because they think that something's going to happen to them because now abortifacients or the chemical abortion is illegal. And we have to fight that and encourage young people to go into whatever specialty the Lord is calling them into.
It actually hasn't been that long since I graduated medical school, so it's kind of hard to say how it's changed since then. There are hostile elements. I think Dr. Williams is right, absolutely. Most people in the profession want to do good, but don't really know what that involves. But there are hostile elements that try to persecute us, and as we saw with Dr. Carney, we have the truth on our side. And when you have the truth on our side, they can still try and persecute us, and sometimes they'll still win, but it's a lot harder for them to do so. And so, absolutely, I would never encourage anyone to go away from medicine just because they're worried about this. I think we have to have pro-life doctors in it. So I'd encourage you to be really motivated to do that.
Thanks, Dr. Miller. And starting with you this time, from your unique position on the front lines of healthcare, what would you like to see the pro-life movement do differently or improve upon? Or what should they be more aware of?
It's a very difficult question because in many ways I think the pro-life movement is doing an incredible job. Doing the practical help, supporting women, the campaigning, the political work. I think there's an incredible amount already going on and doing very well. One thing I think that needs to be done is to challenge the monopoly that abortion providers have over a woman's reproductive lifespan. They will catch them as young girls and they will just force them into this kind of straitjacket pathway for what becoming a woman is like. And that means that it's very easy for when you eventually get pregnant and you don't expect it, you just say, oh, well, I know who's going to help me take care of this. It's Planned Parenthood or it's Marie Stopes. And because they have done that, it's a very easy place for them to go. And so I think pro-lifers have to try and get into the medical field, not only in terms of working as doctors or nurses or midwives or pharmacists, but also to be offering young women another route, to show that there isn't just one way to go through puberty, to go through your reproductive life cycle. Actually, there's a whole load of ways that you can do things differently, and having the baby, if you get pregnant, can be a profound way of flourishing in that. But I think in order to do that, we have to break the monopoly that the other side has over this sort of medical pathway that young women go through.
Thank you. Yep, Dr. Robinson.
Yeah, just to segue that, we have this whole alphabet soup of basically that are just political organizations, and I'm not going to mention any of them, but they promote themselves as representing physicians. But really, when you look at the group of regular, everyday physicians, they don't speak for us. So what we have to do is hold these organizations accountable, stop becoming members of these organizations, and be more involved in Christian medical organizations and move forward, and not allow the liberal media to create the illusion that this alphabet soup of liberal woke medicine organizations take the lead.
Dr. Williams?
One thing that I'd like to see more of is the finding common ground. One thing that I see a little bit that's somewhat disturbing is that we're not necessarily addressing what people are saying to us. In some cases, we just assume, oh, you disagree with me on this, therefore I have to argue with everything you say. I think that's probably not helpful. I think most times when pro-life is done really well, we actually focus on, oh, well, I do share that belief with you. I do care about women. I do care about children. I do agree with medical safety. I do agree with all these things. Really, the only thing that we disagree on is when does life begin? And when I was a medical student, the pro-choice medical group, and I befriended them on purpose, they knew exactly where I stood. They were coached to never, ever talk about the fetus. They were coached to always keep the debate somewhere else. So if we don't waste our time arguing about things we may actually agree on, say, oh, I agree with you with that, I agree with you with that, we can keep our focus on when does human life begin, because that's when we can talk about universal human rights, and I think that's when we're going to really change hearts and minds.
Thank you. Dr. Ruberu.
So I have the privilege of co-leading 2 40 Days for Life campaigns in downtown Philadelphia, where 10,000 babies' lives are ended every year, sadly, in Philadelphia. And the two things that I think are very, very important for pro-lifers as we walk forward is, number one, everything has to be rooted in Jesus. Absolutely everything. Number two, we have to stop recreating the wheel. Everything in some capacity has been done in some way or form. If we can see what has been done, if we put it all on the map, this has been addressed, this has been addressed, this has been addressed. These are the areas that we need to address. We can hyper-focus in, not overdo things that are already being done, and really address the issues. And then number three, we have to make sure, I agree with you, we have to be able to communicate with love and compassion to each and every person that we interact with. always being that vessel that God can work through so that they can understand that the root of all of our beliefs is something outside of this world.
Thank you, Dr. Ruberu. Would you agree that without a successful defense of conscience of doctors and healthcare practitioners, it will be harder or impossible to defend the right of freedom of speech and the right to life?
Well, it's a funny thing. The other side is all about choice, my body, my choice, my own choice. Well, yes, we know that we are the most pro-choice people on the planet. All you need to do is read the Bible. God just tells us he wants to make the right choices, right? So, that being said, within the realm of practicing medicine, if you don't want to do abortions, if you don't want to do whatever, fine. I might not want to do pathology. We make our choices of what we want to do. Now in medicine, we do have basic tenets, the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, and we should work within that. We should not have a choice to go outside of the basic precepts that have stood for millennia in this ministry of medicine.
Dr. Williams, if you have something to add?
Yeah, I want to use a Canadian example to answer this question. So I practice in Alberta, and in Canada, all of our healthcare is sort of provincially regulated. In Ontario, they have the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. And with respect to MAID, they decided that they require something called an effective referral, which means that physicians that don't want to be involved have to send a patient to someone who they know does that procedure. And physicians who conscientiously object or don't want to be involved in that view that as being complicit. So I want to be very clear on what happened. The college was taken to court twice, and they said, oh yes, we do understand that this is infringing on the conscience of the physician. We're not asking them to agree with it. What they asked for then, without realizing it, they were asking for physicians who explicitly did not agree with something, who felt it was wrong, dangerous, immoral, to be involved anyway. That's what they asked for. That's what they required. And then they said, this is for the benefit of the patient. Without realizing, it is never, you might disagree with what they disagree with, but it's never in the benefit of a patient to have a physician caring for them who will do what they believe is wrong. That's the problem.
Very well said. I'm going to move on to our next question from a supporter who says, I believe that Big Pharma funds the abortion industry for access to fetal tissue for research. When I say this with others, they say, prove it. As doctors, can you offer me any support? Is there proof?
Everyone's looking at me, which is unfortunate because I don't have any yet. I mean, yes, we know that fetal tissue has been used. I think there's been recent stuff in America showing that. I think it's pretty obvious from the videos Live Action did. Of course, it's always going to be difficult to like show that in many situations because people don't really want this to be found out. That is quite different. I guess I should just clarify. It's quite different from the issue with vaccines, which is that, or from many vaccines, which is that many vaccines used in research or sometimes in development, cells which are sort of distant descendants of tissue taken from an aborted baby several decades ago. So that's one way in which aborted babies have been used for research, is through this aborted baby maybe 50 years ago. They keep kind of renewing those cells and replicating those cells, and then those cells are being used in research. No one denies that. That's like obvious. The ethical significance of that is debated a lot. You know, I think it's still okay to use those vaccines. Many people don't, and that's okay. The ethical significance is not clear. Whether they are actually using the bodies and tissue from babies that are now being aborted and then use the tissue is a bit more controversial, but as far as I know, those videos from Live Action show that pretty clearly, that that is, in fact, what is happening. And this is before you could basically make fake videos as you can now. This was from a few years ago. So I think that adds to its credibility. So I honestly can't give you a whole load of evidence because it's not something that I've looked into. I don't want to give you the impression that this is really widespread and that it happens all the time, and this is very obviously true. But as far as I know, those videos from Live Action do a pretty good job of showing that it is true in some cases.
And just to remind you, David Daleiden had a series of videos that clearly showed as he interviewed abortionists and how they are dealing in the commercial interests of selling aborted babies for whatever purpose, vaccines or whatever. So it's a market out there, but it's extremely well guarded.
Thank you. Dr. Ruberu, maybe a question for you just because of your comments about how we need to be guided by Christ. How do you feel we can counter the satanic influence that is guiding Western governments on their support of abortion?
Prayer. It's sacrifice, prayer, more sacrifice, more prayer, and then more sacrifice and more prayer. When all of you are interested in giving up those things that you find yourself so addicted to, like sugar or caffeine or whatever else, and you sacrifice those things for the things that are most important to you in your life, you will see how things drastically change. We all need to take this up as a personal conviction, a personal challenge, that even in our day-to-day, we are sacrificing things for this greater good.
Thank you. I can testify to that. So last year, a 19-year-old woman died in Canada from chemical abortion, and I'll add that Campaign Life Coalition does have a petition asking Health Canada to ban it. So how can we fight back and protect women when the product monograph mentions septic shock and death as a possibility of taking the pills? Dr. Williams, maybe? It is the Canadian representative.
That question will be a little bit difficult because, excuse me, but tampons can, like they have the same thing on their product monograph. Product monographs are essentially a legal document that aren't necessarily all that helpful in many ways because they list everything under the sun to the point that some, like physicians ignore most of the stuff that's on the product monograph. So I think the better question is risk. One thing that we do pay very close attention to is something called a black box warning. So black box warning is something that doctors absolutely can't ignore, has to be addressed. If there was a black box warning on that, that would be something that you can't ignore. The product monograph is a little bit easier to sort of gloss over. I'm not sure if that's a helpful answer to that question. But if it's frequent enough or lethal enough, then if there was a move to get it labeled as a black box warning, that would be the most effective way to do that.
And that's fair. I think our main argument against the abortion pill anyway is the fact that it kills a preborn child.
As a corollary to that, unfortunately, we have to recognize these abortionists are transient, itinerant doctors. I hate to even call them doctors, they're really executioners. And what they do is they come to town, they do their work, and then they move to the next town and they do their work. But they are not responsible for their complications. In normal medicine, it's called medical abandonment when a physician leaves their patient postoperatively or associated with any medical intervention. But we see here what we refer to as the abortion distortion, where the laws, like abandonment and stuff, are not applied to these people. So doctors like we have on my left and right will maybe pick up complications due to these itinerant doctors, and you're the one that's going to be sued. You're the one that's going to be sued because a lot of these doctors are not even appropriately insured.
I would just also mention, with the abortion pill, we know that there are many issues, right? We know that there are many complications. You know, mifepristone itself is a drug which blocks the progesterone receptors, And so this medication breaks down into other metabolites also which block progesterone receptors. That material stays within the mother's bloodstream for about 24, 48 hours. Within the next 11 days, she will excrete this in her feces. All of this, the blood, the baby, the feces, all of those things are ending up in our water system. Those things will have downstream effects for the rest of the world. So it's not an easy thing. This is not Tylenol, as they tried to push it off as. It's a very dangerous medication, and we all need to know these facts.
Thank you. Next question. I've seen statistics that indicate the number of physicians providing abortion is declining. If true, are women at greater risk with mid-level and not practitioners providing abortions? Dr. Miller or Dr. Ruberu, I'm not sure if...
I mean, we all know abortion isn't safe to start off with, so no matter who does it, it's never a safe procedure. But absolutely, the less training that somebody has in order to do a D&E procedure, the more dangerous it's going to be, the more chance of, damage to the patient's cervix, perforation of the uterus, leaving products behind, leaving portions of the baby behind, causing septic infections. There are all sorts of complications that you will get with somebody who has less training and less understanding of the anatomy and less care.
I do have a couple of questions for you, Dr. Williams. What is the pro-life climate at the United Nations? Is there hope for the World Health Organization to reflect life in their healthcare for the world?
Oh gosh, thanks so much to whoever asked that question. I think I've been a little bit a victim of a lot of negativity. The UN's so bad, WHO's so bad, completely CDC, completely irredeemable. I was shocked when I was at the UN because that was my idea going, and there are so many people there doing so much good work that just gets totally overlooked because it's not sensational, doesn't get publicized. They just have their heads down and yes, absolutely there is hope. There is hope when people are doing the good work, and there is hope when people aren't, because the darker it gets, the brighter the light shines. So there is always, always, always hope, regardless of what's happening. The WHO, yeah, there's hope. There's definitely some good doctors that are involved there that are doing good work. So thank you so much for that question.
And I'm also going to invite Dr. Miller to chime in because of your interest in the international stage.
Yeah, so I think we can easily confuse really terrible with irredeemable. And we know, not least from the Bible, that that's not true. We know from our own lives that that's not true. So is the UN really terrible? Of course. Is the WHO really terrible? Of course. And I spent a fair bit of time at both, not working, but interacting with people there, and both of them are genuinely horrendous. But does that mean they're irredeemable? Absolutely not. When you see the work that is done at the UN, and not much work is done by pro-lifers at the WHO, but when you see the work done by pro-life groups at the UN and the way that they can mobilize nations, there's actually a huge amount that can be done. Likewise, the same is true. If the WHO is really challenged in a significant way, things will change. If the next American government is Republican and they cut funding to the WHO and say you need to change, they will change. So it's certainly not easy. I'm not saying it's easy to change these things. They're really terrible and they're very difficult to change, but they're not impossible to change, or at least help improve to an extent. The only other thing I'd mention is a lot of people misunderstand kind of what the United Nations is. In terms of, so just a very quick breakdown. When you want to say that the United Nations says something, the United Nations is fundamentally a group of about 200 countries that come up with a consensus. So the only way that you can say the UN says something is if those countries have come to a consensus. If they haven't come to a consensus between every single country, the UN has not said it. But what you get is that there are a lot of bureaucrats at the UN, like special rapporteurs or people working in the UN or special committees, and all of these are just nonsense. They say whatever they're like. They're full of activists and partisans. That doesn't mean that the UN has said something. So it's actually really important that when we hear, oh, the UN has said abortion is a human right again, yes, we should be annoyed that these partisans and bureaucrats in the UN are saying this, and we should try and change that. But we should challenge the idea that the UN has actually said it, because they haven't. The UN only says something in a real substantive sense when every country has agreed this is what they are saying, because the United Nations is exactly that. It is a united group of nations. It is not called the Bureaucrats Alliance. It's called the UN. So yeah, it's important to be careful and clear about that as well.
Thanks for the explanation. I'm going to turn this question into just a yes or no. We hear that doctors no longer have to swear the Hippocratic Oath. Is this true in Canada, in the country you are from? Dr. Ruberu, do you know?
I believe that there are absolutely, sorry, it's supposed to be yes or no. I can't. There are medical schools that have modified it.
Yes. And Dr. Williams?
Yeah, it's been heavily modified. There are groups like the Christian Medical and Dental Society that have Hippocratic Oath swearing ceremonies that a certain cohort of med students will go and still swear the entire oath. Yeah.
Thank God for that. Dr. Miller, maybe? Sorry, unless you have something to add, Dr. Robinson?
Well, I don't know if I have much to add to that, but I want to just segue back to my son, and that is, I love this man. That, he's talking about the UN and all these other NGOs. In the United States, we kill 90% of Down syndrome babies. In New York City, that before they're born, and search and destroy missions called amniocentesis and other diagnostic procedures. In New York City, there are more black babies that are aborted than are born alive. Until the people, which I believe, and God's people, are going to raise up and speak and fight this genocide, nothing's going to happen. We're sitting on a time bomb here. I believe the families and the people that want to represent these people who are a victim of the anti-human spirit of, you can call it Downsophobia or fetophobia or whatever. But I have a sense, because of what has been said earlier, there's a feeling, there's like I believe it was Elijah saying, there's a cloud on the horizon there and the storm is coming. It's coming, y'all, and we are going to win.
And Dr. Miller?
I feel very inadequate answering with just a yes or no after these wonderful words. No, in my country, you don't have to say the Hippocratic Oath or any modern equivalent. It's really up to a medical school and probably up to an individual.
And isn't that a reflection of our culture? Final question, and we are running out of time, but I do want to get to it, for Dr. Haywood Robinson. What would you say to an abortion doctor to make them question their practice enough to make them hopefully leave, if you had 30 seconds?
30 seconds is 29, 20. Okay, there's not a magic bullet. I'm asked that question fairly frequently. If you have the opportunity to speak to an abortionist, speak to him like a regular human being, knowing that the Lord is going to anoint your words to speak to them. And I just want to tell you as I close, I'm kind of reminded of the story in Acts when Paul was preaching, and it was late at night, and there was a young man sitting in the window. And as Paul continued to preach, he fell from the 3rd floor and dead. Paul ran down and revived him and had something to eat, and he continued to preach till midnight. But that's not going to happen tonight.
And on that note, I'd like to thank all of our panelists, Dr. Monique Ruberu, Dr. Kiely Williams, Dr. Haywood Robinson, and Dr. Calum Miller. A big round of applause for all of them. And I hope that all of you will take what you learned this evening and share it with members of your community, so that we might one day have a day where the medical professional can be returned to what it once was, where the Hippocratic Oath can mean something once again, and that the sanctity of life might be appreciated from conception to natural death. Hello again. For those of you who missed my introduction at the the beginning, my name is Josie Luetke. I'm CLC's Director of Education and Advocacy and one of the National March for Life Organizing Committee members. I'd like to thank all of our panelists. As you can tell, they're doing amazing work, and they're exactly the sort of people you'd like to see in the healthcare field. And I really hope you learned something and enjoyed that program. This video will remain up on our YouTube channel, so by all means, please share it with friends and family members. I'd like to thank all of our National March for Life sponsors as well, without whom we wouldn't be able to hold the National March for Life and all of the associated events. And I'd like to encourage you, if you didn't attend the Rose Dinner this year, to consider doing so next year. There's great food and great people, and if you have an organization or a business, to consider sponsoring the National March for Life. On a different note, we will be resuming Life on Film screenings in the fall. We're taking a little bit of a break during the summer. That said, I hope that you don't take a break during the summer, because preborn babies are killed year-round. So we need to take action and do activism in our local communities to bring an end to this. So you might have plenty of ideas for how to get involved. If you don't, please reach out to us. I will mention that Life Chain and 40 Days for Life happen in the fall, but the planning and organizing for those events starts now. Regardless of how you do get involved, please stay busy and continue to stand firm. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and God bless.